people, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're getting back to this bad boy. It's been a while. Naughty Lisa, we're getting back to the film listography. I'm not doing a weekly watches this week because I've watched so little, so I'm going to do one of these instead for you guys. The random one that I chose was List Unforgettable Death Scenes. So I sat last night and I had much of a little think about this. Now, there are a lot of death scenes that affected me a great deal that I've left out. Like Marley from Marley and Me, any dog in any movie ever should be in here, but I left that out because I don't think that's, that's a given. So let's move over to the side a little bit so I can put any graphic I want on this side, any pitch up. And can we just appreciate Christmas art for a moment? He's wearing a Christmas hat, he's happy back there just below. So let's get on with my list of unforgettable death scenes. I've got 10. I have given you 4 honourable mentions that I won't go into detail about. You'll very much be aware of most of them, I'm sure. So my special mentions, one that should be in the top 10, but I haven't put it in there because I've spoken about it so many times in other videos, is from Irreversible. It's a scene in a nightclub with a fire extinguisher, which disturbs the hell out of me. I find it really difficult to watch. Daft Punk did the soundtrack for the movie, and in this section they experimented with sounds and music that are meant to evoke nausea, discomfort, and it certainly does. And this scene, how they did the special effects in this scene, I have no idea because it's one of the most realistic things I've ever seen. Very disturbing. So fire extinguisher scene from Irreversible is an honourable mention. I said more about that than I should have done, but Jack from American Werewolf in London, one of my all-time favourite movies. This one, obviously we don't see a lot, but it's the whole build-up. It's the moors, it's the inescapable situation, it's the vastness of the area, it's the fog, it's just everything. It's just the build-up to this one, I think, is what makes it what it is. We don't see an awful lot, but we hear plenty. And it's the fact that we know that there's very little escape. There's nowhere to hide in the middle of the vast moors in Yorkshire, even though it wasn't filmed in Yorkshire, which is a pet peeve of my husband's because he's from Yorkshire. But Jack, American Werewolf in London. Next one is Frank from Hellraiser. Obviously the effects with this and the fact that he has all these hooks in his flesh and he's pretty much just pulled apart in this movie. If you haven't seen it, if you're not a horror fan, special effects are incredible. It was just a really visceral, it's like, oh my god, what they did. So I had to mention it. He's not in my top 10, but I had to mention him. And the last honourable mention is the entire opening segment to Saving Private Ryan, which I went to see in the cinema, and I was awestruck. I watched the first, awestruck's potentially the wrong way to put it. It was really disturbing to see how visceral and how just the loss of life at the start of that battle scene in Saving Private Ryan. It was, the effects were incredible. It was really sobering knowing that this really happened. Yeah, it was, how you can't be affected by that, I have no idea. So that's our honourable mentions, folks. Let's get into the top 10. I'm not going to say favourite death scenes, unforgettable death scenes. So these aren't in any order, guys. I wrote them down as they occurred to me. So Guido from Life is Beautiful. Oh, this one is obviously not an effect. If you haven't now, I will warn you, if you haven't seen any of these movies, none of them are new. There will be spoilers. I will discuss maybe plots, death scenes. In Life is Beautiful, it's a foreign movie. It won Best Oscar that year. We have a man that ends up going into a concentration camp with his very young son. He's called Guido, and he is trying to make the whole situation not frightening for his son, and he pretends that they're playing a game through this whole movie. There's a beautiful relationship between this father and son all through the movie, and right at the end, he's quite a comical character, quite a jokey character. Right at the end, when he's looking for someone, he gets caught by a German officer and he gets led away to be killed. And as he's being led away by this officer, his little son is hiding so that he's not found again. He still thinks he's playing a game, and as his dad walks past where he's hiding, he winks at him, knowing that he's walking to his death and he's going to be killed, and he keeps it up to the last. Such a poignant movie, never ceases to make me cry, but that scene with Guido being marched to his death and keeping up that game for his little son had to be mentioned in my list. Next one is from a 1997 movie called Cube. Now, the effects may be dated in this these days, but at that time I hadn't seen anything like it before, which is where you have the scene where the person, there's wire and they're like diced into little cubes, this whole person. I just thought the effect was incredible. I was really impressed by it. I hadn't seen anything like it before. And it's always stuck with me. When someone mentions Cube, I always instantly think of this person with the wire just cutting them into little squares. So Cube's in there. Next one is not a gruesome, well it is for me. It's not a really like special effects laden one. It's from one of my favourite horror movies, which is Misery, and it's the death of Annie Wilkes at the hand of Paul Sheldon. We know what Paul's gone through in this movie. I'm not going to talk about the plot of Misery, I'm sure you're all very aware of it. But what he's gone through and the fact he makes her eat the ashes and the charred remains of his book. It's the fact Paul is stuffing Annie's mouth full of the charred remains of the book that he started to burn, the book that she was so desperate to read to see how it ended for Misery. And just, you know, the irony of how she dies and she ends up eating all these like words that he's written that she never got to read. I just love the poignancy of it. I just thought it was fabulous. As I say, it's a favourite movie of mine, so it's going to come in there. Next is, now if you're a younger individual, you perhaps may not have seen this movie. This is the original Carrie, which I saw as a young child. I absolutely loved. I still remember being mortally embarrassed at the opening scene of the naked girls frolicking in the PE showers. I'm sure that's not, well, having been to school in a girls', that's certainly not what it's like, I can assure you. But the scene in this that I'm choosing is the scene of Carrie's mother, Margaret White. And if you've seen the movie, there's a section, his mother, her mother is like a religious fanatic. And there's a scene where Carrie is locked in a little cupboard under the stairs and there's a statue of like Jesus on the cross, I think, yeah, Jesus on the cross. And it's a very eye-catching sort of like scene, or the way he's posed and his eyes are really like almost glowing. It's just very specific and it's a sort of like figure that sticks with you. And in the movie, at the climax, Carrie's mother dies and she is pinned in a door frame and her hands are like to either side, sort of like pinned to the door frame by, I think it was kitchen implements. And how she dies, she has like an arm up here and an arm down here and her head's tilted to one side, but she looks exactly like the statue of Jesus and the hair's the same and the way, the serene look on her face and her eyes. She's a beautiful woman. Just how she looks like a porcelain figure at the end, but she emulates that statue of Jesus. And it's like, even though I was a kid, I remember thinking, she looks like that crucifix of Jesus under the stairs. And it's stuck with me ever since. So Margaret White's death in Carrie. Right, the next one is one that I'm sure a lot of you won't be aware of. If you haven't seen When the Wind Blows, which is an animation by the guy that did The Snowman, is it Raymond Briggs? This is an animation, absolutely fabulous. I knew of its existence, but I started watching it after Ross from Random Horror did, I think it was an episode of 3 from the Grave that he did. And he goes into detail about this story. The characters are called Jim and Hilda Bloggs. This covers like war, this old couple living on their own, and there is, I believe it's a nuclear bomb, and they're trying to like, it's gone off and the world's going to shit, and they're trying to be positive and think they're going to get out the other side. And it just shows how everything changes, everything gets worse, how their health's changing, how there's no food, how there's no safe water. And the scene in this, they go and they lie down together inside these bags to try to protect them. And I think that the old guy is singing hymns, and then he ends up quoting from the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, I think. And his wife tells him, please, you know, shush, stop it. And they lie down in these bags and they die. And we get to know this couple, this old couple, so well, and everything that they're going through, and this like nuclear assault. And right at the end of this movie, and I really should have looked this up, and I apologise, I will look it up and put it below here. There is Morse code for 3 letters, and I can't remember what the 3 letters are, but those 3 letters mean the successful launch of full nuclear weapons, and it's a military Morse code that's right at the end of this movie. And this poor couple, this sweet old couple, it shows everything they went through, how they tried to battle it, how they tried to see the positive, how they thought they would get out the other side, and how eventually they perished. Absolutely fabulous. It is an animation, but it's fantastic. I really do recommend it to you guys. While we're talking about this subject matter, this isn't a death, but I must recommend a movie called Come and See if you haven't seen it. It's about a young boy who he joins the Soviet resistance to fight against the Germans in World War II. The young lad in this, the performance that he gives in this, I've never seen anything like it. It's a foreign movie. It's a very difficult movie to watch in places, but what this kid must have lived through acting this role, he looks like an old man by the end of it. It's all over his face. It's just one of those movies in life you have to see. It's one of those, you know, if there was a list of 100 movies you must see before you die, Come and See should be on it. So please let me recommend that. If you haven't seen it, guys, please check it out. So I've got 4 left. The next one is 5 left. I can't count clearly. So the next one is a very well-known one. It's Day of the Dead, and it's Captain Henry Rhodes. Obviously, it's that scene with him being dragged backwards. He's just been ripped in half. He's a horrible, nasty character, so we're quite glad to see it, to be fair. But it's a horrible way to go. It's those special effects. It's the time when those practical effects were alive and well, when we didn't rely on CGI, which in most horror people's opinion, in most horror fans' opinion, we want to see practical effects, because CGI just never has the same visceral, guttural impact that the practical ones did. So yeah, Captain Henry Rhodes, Day of the Dead. My next one is probably going to be a very popular one by anyone else that does this list, I would imagine. It's not a particularly gory one, but it's a very surprising one. We didn't expect it. The marketing of this movie was perfect. It is Drew Barrymore's death in Scream. Obviously, it's Drew Barrymore. She's an actress I love. No one expected her to die right at the start of the movie. But not only was it that we didn't expect to see her die, and it was a real shock and surprise, it's one of the most, what I would imagine, because obviously I've never stabbed anyone, it's one of the most realistic, and you can really put yourself in there, stabbing scenes. I don't feel they overdid it for effect. I don't feel they pulled punches for censorship. I do feel that it was so realistic. I feel that the sound effects, I feel like how everything panned out, it was so spot on to how it actually would be. And I can only say that from what I imagine it would be. But a lot of movies go overboard with, you know, blood squirting out everywhere, or they dial it back and they don't really show you how nasty it is. But Drew Barrymore from Scream, shocking death, realistic death, always sticks in my mind. I had to put that in. So the last 3, now this one, for long and many a day I've been trying to find out what this movie was called, and I couldn't. And the reason I couldn't is because it's not a movie. It's actually an episode of the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. This is Final Escape. I saw this as a child and it has stayed with me still to this day. I remember this shiver. Certain scenes in movies will send like a shudder or a shiver through me if I'm not expecting something, and it really oh my god, you know. And I had that feeling when I watched this, the same feeling I had when I saw John Kramer get off the floor at the end of the first Saw movie. Never forget that feeling. I had that feeling when I watched this as a child, and this is a movie which follows a guy. He's in prison. His character name is Paul Perry. He's in prison and he starts a plan with an alcoholic guy that works in the prison. He makes coffins for inmates. So he hatches this plan where this guy's going to pay him. This guy's going to bury him in a coffin, and then he's going to come back and dig him up when night has fallen, and he's going to escape that way, being in a coffin. So he's going to be put in with the next person that dies. And this happens, and he gets put in the coffin, and he's lying there and he's waiting to be rescued. He's waiting for the old guy to dig him up. And obviously I think as an adult I would know what was coming, but as a child I had no idea. And he puts he puts a lighter on in his coffin, and who's right next to him but the guy that's meant to be digging him up. So he knows that no one's coming to get him. He's been buried alive. He's not going to escape. And it's like, fucking hell, wow. I mean, I love that. And I must have been a sick individual. I was a child when I saw this. I think it's not, I haven't written it down. I think it's from the 60s. Obviously I didn't see it in the 60s. I'm not quite that old just yet. But it was really stuck with me as a child, still to this day. Absolutely loved it. So yeah, Final Escape from Alfred Hitchcock Howard. So we've got two left, guys. My second choice is David at the End of the Mist. The End of the Mist, guys. The End of the Mist is just one of those endings you either love or hate. I am in the love camp. Big spoiler, if you haven't seen The Mist and you don't want to know how it ends, because it's a shocker, guys, don't listen to me. I'll put something on the screen that says spoilers. I'll take it off when I've finished wittering. So at the end of the movie, he's in the car with his son and I think 3 other people, son and 3 people, and they don't think they're ever going to escape. They're going to have a death, a really nasty, horrible death at the hands of these monsters. And he decides the kindest thing to do, there is a gun in the car with 4 bullets in it. Obviously there's 5 of them, and he decides that he is going to shoot. They all agree, and he's going to shoot all these people, and he's going to be the one that has the death, this horrible death at the hands of what's threatening them. One of these people, obviously, he has to shoot his own son, who's a child. And so he kills his son, he kills the other 3 people in the car, and he gets out of the car at the end racked with grief and guilt and just awful, to surrender to whatever's going to kill him. And soldiers have come to save them all. So he has just killed these 4 people, including his own son, when soldiers were just there, just ready to save them, and he didn't need to kill any of them. And that is just, you know, the swear word. When I watched that, I was like, it was kind of, sometimes you watch a movie and you're like, no, and you're devastated, but then you come away from it and think, that was incredibly effective, that was incredibly clever, I love that, that's fabulous. And for me, The End of the Mist just elevated the movie, just right up there. So number 1, guys. Right, number 1 isn't a movie, number 1 is a TV show. And I could not watch, I turned away from this, and that's a lot to say for me because I like gore, I like effects, I like to watch things like that. But if it's a much loved character that you're watching, that even them dying is like, no, you can't kill this person. But they kill them in a really grotesque and brutal way. And all the special effects comes into play that you usually see for a victim that you either don't know much about or you don't care. And this is Glenn in The Walking Dead. Spoilers for The Walking Dead, folks. This is where Glenn is beaten to death by a baseball bat. But look. Yep, there it is. Lucille, take 2. Glenn is beaten to death by a baseball bat by Negan. I will never forget the eyeball protruding scene. I struggled. I can't watch that. If I ever rewatch The Walking Dead, I will have to look away. I just can't bear it. I don't think I could even listen to it. I don't think I've ever been so disturbed by a death in my life. And no, it's not the goriest death I've ever seen. It's not the most brutal. It's horrible. But it's because it was a much loved character and they took him out in such a hideous way. And you just don't think you're ever going to see something like that. It's not like... Favourite characters tend to just die, and whatever happens quickly. They fall off something, they're shot. It never tends to be really, really brutally nasty, but this was just hideous. And Negan went on to be my favourite character in The Walking Dead. You can't see it, I've actually even got a statue of him up there doing this with a baseball bat. But that scene with Glenn and that baseball bat will never leave me, and I don't think I could ever watch it again. Similar to the fact I will never watch Marley and Me again. Marley should be in that. Marley and Me, I went to the cinema, Jennifer Aniston and Owen Wilson. You're going to expect a romantic comedy, aren't you? I went to the cinema to see it. Jesus Christ. No. Never kill a dog in a movie, guys. I never want to see a dog die in a movie ever. It's not good. So that is my list, long-winded though it may be. A bit of waffle, guys. That's my... What did it say? It wasn't favourite. Memorable or something? I've taken my wee thing. List unforgettable death scenes. So the example that's used here, if you're wondering, is his open face as the clearing light of the sun shines in his eyes. It is a face of peace, love, a face of true deep serenity. Christopher McCandless's Death and Into the Wild, directed by Sean Penn. Yes, that's the one about the adventurer guy that goes out. He always does things in the wilderness, and he ends up dying, basically. It's called Into the Wild. It's a true story, Christopher McCandless. It's really good. So that's the one that's chosen by the book. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I shall be back next week, hopefully with a what I watched weekly watches, if I actually watch anything worth talking to you about. I will try to get back to doing one of these a week as well, guys, because I've been hideously slacking with this. Thank you so much for watching. Look forward to speaking to you next time. Over and out from Lacey Loves.